In a grand, sprawling forest, high up in the treetops, there lived a lively group of birds. Their nests were built in the thick branches of a tall tree, nestled comfortably amidst the leaves. The birds were well protected from the elements, and their homes were warm and dry, especially on stormy days. They had mastered the art of building their nests with twigs, leaves, and soft materials, and they often admired their own handiwork. The birds felt proud of their cozy, secure homes and their ability to weather any storm. One rainy afternoon, as dark clouds gathered in the sky and the wind howled through the forest, the birds noticed a group of monkeys huddled together on the ground. The monkeys, with their long tails and nimble hands and feet, appeared to be cold and shivering, drenched from the rain. They were sheltering under a few large leaves, but it was clear that they had no proper home to protect them from the downpour. They were uncomfortable, their fur matted and heavy with water, and they seemed to be struggling against the cold. From their high perches in the trees, the birds looked down at the monkeys, who appeared so helpless in comparison. Feeling a bit smug about their own warm, dry nests, the birds began to chatter among themselves. One of the birds, eager to express superiority, called out to the monkeys below. "Why don't you build nests like we do?" The bird shouted down to them. "You have hands and feet, just like us. Surely you could build a cozy home in the trees and stay dry, instead of shivering on the ground like that." The monkeys, hearing the bird's taunting words, felt insulted and hurt. They had never considered the idea of building nests in the trees, and now the birds were mocking them for not doing so. The monkeys didn't like being made fun of, especially by creatures they had once considered fellow forest dwellers. Their pride was stung by the birds' words, and they began to feel angry. "How dare they speak to us like that?" one of the monkeys muttered. "Just because they live in the trees doesn't make them better than us." The birds, unaware of the monkeys' growing resentment, continued to smugly enjoy their dry, warm homes, basking in the sense of superiority that had come with the storm. But little did they know that their mocking words had planted the seeds of anger in the hearts of the monkeys. As the rain finally began to subside and the sky cleared, the monkeys, now full of frustration and determination, decided to take action. They climbed up the tree, their strong arms and agile hands helping them easily scale the trunk. The monkeys, in a fit of anger, began tearing apart the birds' nests, ripping at the twigs and leaves with reckless abandon. The baby birds' nests were destroyed, and their fragile eggs fell to the ground, breaking into pieces. The birds, seeing the monkeys wreaking havoc on their homes, were horrified. They had never expected such retaliation. Their cozy nests, which they had taken such pride in, were being torn apart in front of their eyes. The sound of the broken eggs echoed in the air, and the birds felt a deep sense of loss and sadness. Their precious homes, built with care and effort, were now in ruins. The birds flew down in a panic, trying to stop the monkeys, but it was too late. The damage had already been done. As the last of the nests were destroyed, the birds realized with a sinking feeling that their smugness and taunting had led to this destruction. They had insulted the monkeys, thinking that their way of life was superior, without understanding or appreciating the monkeys' own struggles. In that moment, the birds realized the true lesson of the day. They had been wrong to mock the monkeys for not having nests like theirs. They had forgotten that every creature had its own way of adapting to the world, and what worked for one might not work for another. The monkeys had never needed nests the way the birds did, and the birds' pride and boasting had only hurt them in the end. Feeling ashamed, the birds decided to make amends. They began to gather twigs, leaves, and soft materials once more, not to build their own homes, but to help the monkeys. The birds knew they could not undo the damage they had caused, but they could at least offer their help in rebuilding what had been lost. They worked together, with newfound humility, to create shelter for the monkeys, showing them kindness and support rather than mockery. The monkeys, seeing the birds' change of heart, were touched by the gesture. They realized that the birds had learned from their mistakes and were no longer acting out of arrogance. The monkeys accepted the birds' help, and they began to rebuild their homes, this time with a sense of shared understanding. The two groups, once divided by pride and misunderstanding, found common ground in the end, and the forest became a place of harmony once again. The moral of the story of the birds and the monkeys highlights the dangers of pride and the importance of empathy. The birds' initial sense of superiority led them to insult the monkeys, but when their actions had consequences, they learned the value of kindness, humility, and offering help instead of mockery. It teaches us to be considerate of others, to understand that everyone has their own way of doing things, and to be supportive rather than judgmental. The moral of the story of the birds and the monkeys highlights the dangers of pride and the importance of empathy. The birds' initial sense of superiority led them to insult the monkeys, but when their actions had consequences, they learned the value of kindness, humility, and offering help instead of mockery. It teaches us to be considerate of others, to understand that everyone has their own way of doing things, and to be supportive rather than judgmental.